Good morning, everyone. Mr. Allen here. I received a couple of emails yesterday. Apparently, they came in during class, but I didn't see them sort of until the end of the period. And they contained some pretty similar information. So I thought instead of kind of responding to them individually, I'd address them kind of to the class verbally, thinking that A, I'll probably babble either way. At least I'll babble a little quicker on video. And there may be other people who had similar concerns, and that so they could sort of hear my answers as well. And then I'll ask for comments kind of at the end, and free for all comments, whatever you sort of want to say is fine for sure. So I guess I'll start by apologizing right up front because I don't know, sort of reading through the two emails, whether this is a new or sort of new concerns, or whether they've been ongoing, but because the material is just getting harder now, they're sort of coming to the forefront. But a couple of the things that were suggested were that the lessons were maybe a little vague, not going into enough examples to really prepare students for the upcoming work. Now, I'll say right away, if this is a new occurrence because of identities, there's not much we can do about that. Every identities question has multiple paths to solve. Every one of them is going to be different. Essentially they're puzzles, like you could say like a Sudoku puzzle. You don't want to actually see the same puzzle twice because there's no value in that. So you're trying to learn ideas around how to solve them, and then you basically have to kind of get the experience of, okay, when I see this and I see this, I know that it could lead me to a sine squared plus cos squared is one sort of a situation. So again, it's just sort of, if the ideas were to do with the identity section specifically, there's not a lot I can do there. There's no content to teach really. It's a problem-solving exercise, and it's a work through it sort of exercise. But that said, to sort of my intent with the stop, go again. All right. I will apologize though, just because overall I think there's sort of been a misunderstanding about my intent with this course and how this course has run in the past. The fact that I got the emails, actually, I guess is probably even a good place to start, that they popped up during class time. We have a class together. Block A is our class time. And so the intent is that whenever you are running into problems, in theory, you're coming in there and we're kind of clearing up those problems. And with that feedback, not only from me to you, but from you to me, I get to figure out where either you're lacking or where I lacked information, or where specific examples or sorry, not examples, but specific questions I gave were unclear or too hard or whatever. Sort of like, again, a very regular classroom. I want you to sort of think about kind of, if I had been in your school, and still teaching this course the same way, how would things have been different? Would you have come to see me as opposed to email me, or would you have still emailed me, not in this case specifically, but just generally throughout this semester? Got distracted there. Give me a second. So the idea behind any lessons I post is that they're what's going to get you going. And I don't know what it's like at all the schools throughout the board, but we've been pushed for a long time to get away from long lessons at the start of a class. In my regular classroom, I try to avoid standing up at the front and doing a typical lesson because the board believes that that's a very poor way to teach math overall. That getting students working, getting students going, and then kind of circulating, helping them out. Obviously, you have to introduce the topic, which is sort of the intent of the lessons when I post them. Get you going, get you enough information that you sort of have the basis, and then obviously as you run into different questions, you would then be asking for information as to why this happened this way, or where I go from here, or how I tie this to other ideas that we've seen before. So the one comment was that there maybe weren't enough examples of different types of questions. And again, sort of that was, in my opinion, not the way, or not the way math lessons are supposed to go. You get the basic idea, and then as you get the the information you need in the individual questions, you ask for help. You try to clear up why this one is different from the last one, or why I'm not getting this one when I got the first few. So now that's kind of why I try to post a fair number of solutions as well. Certainly in the identities section, there were, I don't know, maybe 20 questions posted or 20 solutions posted. And each one you sort of saw was obviously a little different than the previous one. Again, with identity specifically, there are a lot of paths to get to a solution, and so it's a little hard, obviously, to post all the solutions. So getting that feedback from you saying, sir, here's what I tried. Can you tell me where I went wrong or why this doesn't work? Is sort of what we're lacking maybe in this current dialogue. And I call it dialogue, and yet I'm actually just talking to you. So obviously that's, again, not the ideal situation. So moving forward, I got review written down here and test expectations. Now again, not sure whether this is specific to this current test or whether it's kind of just a general idea of something that's gone on for the semester. But both students did mention that they felt either the review wasn't preparing them sufficiently for the test, or that the review should have sort of very similar, or maybe all the questions that will appear on a test. So a couple of things there. I guess I'll say first, I do always mark with the TAC format, or my interpretation of the TAC format. So as we are now into kind of more advanced concepts, there will be thinking questions on your test that require you to think, to problem solving. It's the tips category, thinking, inquiry, problem solving, which means there will be something on there, usually at least, that requires you to do a new problem of some sort. On the last test, of course, it was the work the factor theorem backwards. And then the logarithm one was just sort of take the concept from exponentials of, if we can get the same bases, get the two sides of the equation looking the same, we can pull the middle parts out, the non-logarithmic parts out, the actual answers out, make them equal to each other and solve them. Neither of those is beyond you. On both questions, the quote-unquote average or median mark was level 4, but obviously it required some thinking and it required some work on your part. Now, as far as the review goes, one of the other things I'd suggest is part of my intent with this course, part of my job, if you will, is to kind of get you ready for next year. My assumption, if you're in this class, is you're going on to, at least potentially, you're going on to university and taking maths. And, without getting into it too much, when I was in university, and I know that was a long time ago, you guys don't know how long ago maybe, but it's been a long time, we didn't do review. Like, there was no review. I had one of my first year courses, I remember the last day of class, the prof put up a new problem, kind of walked us through it, and then he said, okay, that's it. And some people said, so are you going to do a review for the exam? And he said, what do you mean review for the exam? He said, what you've taken in the course is what's on the exam. And we kind of walked out. I don't know if it's still like that. I don't know how tough it is. But certainly the review should, in my opinion, should always be just kind of reminding you of what you need to know. And so, there was a time when we didn't necessarily give review sheets or review questions. Students just went and reviewed. And I know things have changed overall, but especially in this section with the identities, and I keep kind of coming back to them because they're a pain, I admit that. It's hard to give you every type of question. So that leads me to the one thing that both students mentioned, specifically conjugates. And I think maybe there's a bit of a misunderstanding of conjugates, and I apologize again. So conjugate, and this is from Math is Fun, the website. A conjugate is anything or any term that looks like the other term with the symbols changed in between. Okay, so it's poorly worded here, but we have 3x plus 1 and 3x minus 1 are conjugates. X squared minus 3 and x squared plus 3 are conjugates. And then here's the one that sort of comes up all the time. A plus b times a minus b are conjugates, or a plus b and a minus b are conjugates of each other. And the reason conjugates come up is because it is a difference of squares. So I'm thinking that maybe when I had a student ask me about conjugate, and that's why I mentioned it specifically in yesterday's news post. But I'm thinking that maybe the question was, will we be expected to do roots and know that if I have a root of this plus this, I need to multiply by the square root of the same thing with the, again with the conjugated addition subtraction sign. And so I apologize there. I assume maybe that's where the problem came in. And then I went back in the solutions and realized that was one of the ones that I didn't actually post a solution to. So again, there, if I'd had somebody ask me about it earlier, I would have realized that that was an important question to post, and I would have realized probably it was a good one to tell you to leave off. There were a couple of questions in there that did sort of that I have crossed off in the past that either I didn't cross off this time when I would have, or I at least told students not to worry about after the fact. But as far as the term conjugate goes, you've done conjugate since grade 10. So just the idea that if I multiply this thing by the same thing with a plus and a minus in each of them, I get a difference of squares. So certainly conjugates overall, I just assume now will come up at any point in time. As far as the roots specifically goes, that was stuff you saw in grade 11, and I still think it could come up at different times, where just when you see a square root, you know that multiplying by that same square root will allow the square roots to essentially disappear. Root this times root this, whatever's inside, we just get the inside. The square root of x times the square root of x is x, and so on. So I think there's, anyways, a misconception about what conjugates maybe was. There won't be any square roots on the test, but certainly the idea that if I have a 1 minus sign, I want to multiply it by a 1 plus sign so that I can get 1 minus sign squared, which can then become co-squared, is definitely going to be on there. And otherwise, I think the square roots specifically, I would liken them to something like x squared plus 6x plus 5. If that comes up in a question from now on, for the rest of your math career, I wouldn't consider that a topic that you're likely to see reviewed. The understanding is you know how to solve something like that, you know to factor it, you know to find the roots to get the solution. So if something like that were to come up in a logarithmic question or something, the assumption is that you would sort of know how to use that. I think probably a lot of the conjugate concepts are the same. If you see this and you know that you can multiply the numerator and denominator of the fraction by a minus b, whatever a minus b happens to be, and that will give you a difference of squares, I think you can assume that that just is going to happen moving forward. So again, I think the problem here probably is that maybe we didn't realize what conjugates were, or maybe I didn't realize what the question was being asked of me. But probably the solution again was right here. If it had been asked of me live and I started to answer, and the student said, "Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, when there's a square root," we could have cleared up that problem a little bit. And I'm jumping around a bit. I don't know if I actually answered this, but sort of one other area where I tend to get feedback, of course, is just kind of in how students are doing on tests versus their marks last year. And I did kind of check that recently. I hadn't checked it. I checked it earlier in the year, of course, but the marks were quite high earlier in the year, so they were very much in favor of this year versus last year. Right now, the class, if I take out the two students who've taken grade 12 functions before, the class overall is about 4 marks higher than they were last in grade 11. So essentially, that means that the marks are, to me, looking like they're on par with what happened in the past, and so that didn't stand out to me as being that the tests were too hard or students were unprepared or anything like that. So I guess I'll apologize again, but a lot of this I think has come down to just communication and either misunderstanding as to what the expectations for the class are or how the class was supposed to run. Yeah, I guess that's probably about where I'll stop. So I hope I addressed everything that was in there. I welcome your comments, either negative or positive, whichever. If you feel like either you're not being prepared sufficiently, you can certainly let me know. If sort of specific areas, maybe, again, I sort of mentioned conjugates a few times and identities because those were the two terms that identities is kind of the thing that we were working on most recently, and conjugates were mentioned specifically in the two emails. But I don't know if there were other topics that, when tested or when reviewed, you thought didn't maybe fit into the lessons very well. And as I said, like the lessons, the intent of the lessons, and this is just the way we've been trained, is that you introduce the topic, you get students going, and then the reason we schedule it so that all students in the class have block A off is because the intent was that there'd be a fair bit of interaction in the Adobe chat classroom. Overall, early on, of course, because the marks were so good, that wasn't happening, and maybe we kind of got away from that being the basis of the class. And again, I apologize for that. Until I got some feedback suggesting that maybe students were feeling unprepared, I didn't realize students were feeling unprepared because, as I said, the marks looked pretty good. So your comments are welcome. Now, again, I guess in this case, probably email's better because you don't want to come into the Adobe chat room and be typing something that might be somewhat private and have somebody else come in. I just thought of something for a second there. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pause here. Okay, yeah, so the last thing I just sort of thought of as I was saying that, I don't know what everybody has planned for the test, and it's always hard for me to kind of set a test date because, of course, I have to set it far enough ahead that I can contact your schools and so on. If, as sort of groups, you want to talk to your supervising teachers, I don't necessarily know who that is at each school. I know who I send the stuff to. But I guess it's Mr. Delic or Delich. Sorry, I never did learn how to say his name, even though I coached basketball against him for many years. Well, I never coached basketball against him, really. He was way better than I was. But what was I going to say? If you want to speak to him at Timmins High and postpone the test for a couple of days till Tuesday or something, if that kind of makes you feel more comfortable, so we have time to kind of interact and figure out where we're lacking or what we're lacking, certainly feel free to do that. At the other schools, of course, there's only a couple people I think at each of the other schools, or one or two people at each of the other schools. So if you want to talk to your supervisors, please feel free to do that. I'll email the people that I know, who I have names for, and suggest that if an extension is warranted or needed, then that's certainly okay. But again, if I could be told what's going on, if you sort of just send me an email saying we spoke to so and so, I'm going to write the test on Monday instead or Tuesday instead. That would be, or like the class is going to write it. Hopefully the Timmins High group, because it's a fairly big group, mostly can find a day that works for them. I know Thursday and Friday were bad for the girls and the boys respectively. So some guys were gone for basketball, girls were gone for volleyball, and so it might be Monday or Tuesday anyways. But we can work that sort of thing out. Again, the only way we can do it though is by having a lot of communication because it is a bit of a job to kind of get it all worked out. So anyways, I'm stopping there because it's nearly 20 minutes and I really apologize for that. But I think I kind of need to say a fair bit of that, and hopefully between us we can kind of clear this up and finish a little bit stronger. One last time, really sorry that it kind of has gotten to this point, and hopefully we can kind of get more comfortable moving forward. I know it's late. Stop talking. Okay, I will. Bye, everyone.